Hello everyone, my name is Ami. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Roga. I want to give everyone a warm welcome to our fourth episode of the Save Ourselves from Stress podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Sam Kirschner. Hey Sam, how's it going?
Hello.
All right. Just a quick intro. Roga, as you may already know, is a company building a device and an app-based therapy to help people with symptoms of stress and burnout. We all believe that no one should suffer from stress alone and anxiety, and so the goal of this podcast is to bring you information that makes it clear that stress is something that no longer needs to be stigmatized. It's something that a lot of people live with and have overcome, and we'd love to bring some really cool stories and information that helps us with that. Just a reminder, this is by no means medical advice. If you're dealing with mental health issues, you can always please go to see your practitioner and your doctor for medical advice. All right, I want to give a big welcome to Sam here. He's one of our biggest mentors and advisors. I'll just quickly talk a little bit about Sam. He's graduate from Berkeley University. Sam became a director at Village Global pretty early on. And Village Global, for those who don't know it, is an early stage VC and network for startups. And after that, Sam went ahead and became a director for ODX, which is an accelerator part of the Ondeck network that includes more than 1,000 companies, now worth over $9 billion. He's also a big mountaineer, hiker, burner. So welcome, Sam. How's it going?
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Ami. And I've been very excited for this, and it's an honor to be here.
Awesome. So Sam was also one of our biggest advocates behind the Roga endeavor and the project when we got accepted to ODX program, and he has since then become a mentor, an investor, advisor, and a friend from us here at Roga. So he also has a super interesting background and incredible story. So I'll tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, and your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't get too much into it. You kind of covered parts of my background, but I grew up in Colorado. I've always loved the outdoors, just being connected into nature, and then came out to California, went to school at Berkeley, really got much more interested in meditation during college and kind of spirituality there. I took a class on it, and I learned just, a lot more about the different kind of facets of meditation and, ways to relieve stress. For me, I rock climb. Rock climbing for me is one way of doing that. Anywhere that you find flow, I think, is a place where you can actually relieve stress and just kind of disconnect from your everyday and be present in your body. And then, career-wise, I was a data scientist for a few years after school. I studied statistics with a concentration in math and computer science at Berkeley. And then I've always kind of been in and around the VC ecosystem. I started an accelerator in undergrad. From that, I helped start a fund that invests in the University of California, Berkeley ecosystem called the House Fund, which I was involved in for a very long time as an advisor and later as a part of the team. And then a part of Village Global and now Ondeck. And I've gotten the opportunity to work with hundreds of amazing founders, including yourself, Ami.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been a privilege to be part of Ondeck. And to get to know you a little bit better. Really cool that you're into climbing. I'm also into climbing and meditation, so it's awesome to meet peers like you. So Sam, tell us a little bit about your journey and more specifically about how you see stress and anxiety manifesting, in leading big organizations and big VCs. For example, being an investor in a VC, what it's like to be on that side of the coin, and the outcomes that this have on, and the toll that it has on mental health.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think, in many ways, VC and venture capital, it shouldn't be something that creates stress. Like a lot of these people are getting paid well. They're comfortable. They're oftentimes in places where they're stable. I think oftentimes people, if you've made it to the point that you're a VC and you're an investor, oftentimes you're privileged, right? And so with that, though, on the other side of it is you're managing a lot of money in some instances. I was an investor yesterday who is planning to try and deploy 200 and $300 million a year, and like very casually mentions this. And, that's money that comes from endowments, nonprofits, people's pension funds, insurance. It's, it's pretty crazy to think about that. And there is a lot of weight, I think, that comes with knowing that you're managing money for some of these institutions and in places that you want to do well and you want to do right by those investors in your funds. And so, in addition to that, venture capital has gotten a lot more competitive, I think, over the last 10 years. There's a lot more people in the ecosystem. There's a lot more people fighting to get into deals. The last 2 years, especially, were very frenetic. Major changes that were happening within the economy with COVID-19, people working from home, the way that our deals are getting done changing, valuations changing, money coming into the ecosystem. And, the pace was really frenetic. And I think
Yeah.
for a lot of investors too, you're doing deals. It's not like a company where you do the same thing. You wake up every day, you're working on the same product, you're in meetings with a small group. Like you need to be out there. And I think there's a constant pressure to be out there and meeting with folks. And so all this leads to being a lot of stress. And, there's different ways that people have coped with that. I think a lot of people I see meditate. A lot of people are actually going to meditation camps. I've heard of this of executives as well. Early on in my time kind of working around startups, I realized that a lot of the strongest founders that I knew were meditating every day, not openly talking about it. There's jokes that, some of them have gurus or, spiritual shamans that they work with as well. And, the science has really shown more and more whatever you can do to lower your stress. I think the more effective you are, you sleep better, you're more present throughout your day. I think you show up
Mhm.
to your job better, you show up to your family better, you're more fulfilled personally. And so, there's tons of ways to reduce stress. There's devices like the Roga, which can support, people who are going through different stress or, maybe even are experiencing things like depression or, more advanced forms of stress. There's, meditation, which I've hit on, but it's also exercise, right? It could be eating well. It could be merely working through problems with the people around you. And so, I think for me specifically, I've really found meditation to be one of the greatest things. I think the biggest misconception with meditation too is, you have to sit for an hour every day in the morning, an hour at night, and you have to close your eyes and, you're not going to be productive. You're going to, tune out the world. But meditation can simply be walking, you can do it in the shower and just being present and feeling the water kind of falling on you. It can be, for me, I sometimes meditate when I'm making coffee in the morning
Yeah.
and waiting for it to brew. I try and find small moments, to really weave in just being present in your body, being present in your mind, trying to be present in, the moment that you're in. And I think, I've started using the Roga, you're saying I'm an advisor, I'm all these things, I'm also a user of Roga. Part of what makes me a believer is I've used it myself. I think part of it is the actual electrostimulation and the science behind it, which I'm a believer in.
Hmm.
The other component of it for me is ritual, right? And I think that it's actually the ritual of having something that you step into and use, and it becomes a part of your meditation and snaps
Right.
you into that moment. For me, the ritual of making coffee, it's stacking, right? It's this idea of stacking rituals.
Hmm.
How do you stack meditation and thoughtfulness on top of that?
Wow, it's so amazing to hear that, and you don't usually see this side of the picture where that like VCs and investors are also dealing with it, because you see them as, they have everything solved, they have all the money, they're successful, and actually the decision making is daunting and it's exhausting. So especially when you have a ton of different variables in the market and different startups, different industries, and also so much pressure. So it's very interesting to see that from the VC side. I also wanted to ask you about the other side, which is on the startups and the founders specifically, because you mentor and advise a lot of startups on deck and the accelerator. So and we know that at least in the US, below 40 years old, you have about 45% of the population dealing with severe stress, which is like almost half of the people that you're talking to. And for founders, I can only assume it's even more. So, what's your experience in with dealing with founders and their stress levels, and how are they coping, if anything? And if you see this affecting the way their startups work, their relationship work.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it's something that I became interested in at House Fund and, was a thread for me throughout Village and Ondeck as well, which is, the mental component of being a founder. And, I'm really glad more people are talking about it. But I think being a founder is pretty lonely. Part of what I've loved about Village and Ondeck is they've created really strong communities of founders to be able to support each other. And I think that's a very unique thing that, didn't exist, a while back. And having that space to be able to be together and be real with each other is incredibly important. But, there's a lot of weight. People are, you're talking about families, people who have a job under you who you're trying to retain and keep happy and keep employed. You're talking about keeping customers happy. You're talking about keeping your board and your investors happy, right? Like there's a huge amount of weight as a founder in terms of everything around you. You're thinking about burn, you have a checklist of 100 things that you want to try and get through every day, and you can get through maybe 5, probably more likely 3 of those if you're lucky, right? And so
If you're lucky, yes.
you know better than many. And so it's, there is a ton of weight there. And I think that, like I said, the same thing for investors where, you want to be more effective in your job, in decision making and all of it, you need to be treating yourself well, right? And so I think that the mental component is more and more important. More and more investors are thinking about that and thinking about how to address that within their companies. Even the current economic climate, things were so busy. People were working from home. I think, in my opinion, work from home and the remote world that we're in is detrimental to mental health. I think a lot of people have dealt with mental health challenges that, never went addressed or people didn't even admit themselves. And it's independent of wealth or anything, right? Like you could have a great job that's paying well, business is booming, and you still are challenged by it. And it's independent of VCs. It's independent of, founders. It's independent of how well you're doing. In many ways, people who are doing better sometimes struggle more because it's like, if I have everything, how come I'm not fulfilled, right? How come I'm not happy? Some of the most unhappy people are actually the people you'd expect to be the happiest because they have everything. But you actually realize, I think that once you have everything and you realize that you're still unhappy, you become even more unhappy in some way because you realize that happiness doesn't come from having things. It actually comes from within. And I think that's the journey that a lot of people have to go on when it comes to stress and it comes to, self-actualization, is that a lot of people are seeking for, some sort of external validation, the car that they want, the house that they want, the next round of financing that they want. But the reality is that, you can convince yourself that you've already made it. And in many ways people have, and it's never going to feel like it's enough. And you have to find ways for it to be. And you have to find ways to go inside. And I think that's why meditation and some of these things really matters because it allows you to do that. I think therapy is another thing that's becoming increasingly prevalent. For founders, we call this an executive coach, which is another form of therapy, which I think I highly recommend founders work with an executive coach. I highly recommend anyone who's interested work with an executive coach. There's life coaches, there's career coaches, there's tons of coaches out there now. There's a great platform that one of my friends runs called exec.com, which is a way to find coaches and integrate that into your job. And I think, there's more and more platforms that are popping up to support people in this, right? And I think it's an amazing trend. And it's a super important trend that people find ways to use a release valve outside of, their work, outside of their, the people that are around them in their company or their spouse or their partner. And, it feels like it's getting addressed more. The amount that I hear founders talking about it and working on it is important. I think having things like Roga are going to become increasingly important as a way to, create a ritual, as a way to increase the efficacy and, the ability of meditation to really make an effect on your emotions. And, I think that there's just more and more of a need for platforms like this to help people. Right. And I hope that this becomes a part of, every founder's journey.
Right. And yeah, that's an interesting point because and you've mentioned this many times about the importance of meditation and also the help, like to actually look for help when you're dealing with stress and especially burnout for founders. And you've used the Roga device for quite a few months now. So I wanted to maybe ask you a little bit of the type of your experience with dealing with stress and anxiety, especially with the current situation, and the pressure of so many founders looking for you
Yeah.
to help them, as well as so many VCs that looking for you to and LPs to invest with their money as well. So how have you coped with those levels of stress and anxiety, and how was the Roga journey in this, in terms of the stimulation itself for the symptoms of anxiety and stress, and the app and the content with the guided sessions and the different instructors?
Just so I make sure I understand the question, how did I find that it was helpful, and how should founders and people think about using Roga?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Great. For me, the biggest thing is, you need to find a way for it to be a part of your day. And I think that one of the biggest challenges that busy people have in building meditation or using Roga as a part of, their normal habit is finding time for it. And I think you have to convince yourself that using Roga and exercise and things like this are actually a benefit to your time. They're going to make you more productive during the hours that you have. I don't think about productivity as the number of hours in front of your screen. I think about how much you can actually get done and how much mental energy you have, right? And so I think between meditation and exercise, those are two huge levers that people have and should be using regularly. And it's hard. Don't get me wrong. Creating a habit of this stuff is hard. I fall in and out of meditating. I wish that I did it every day consistently, and it's tough. I think, stacking is one way of doing it, building it into your routine. Another way of doing it is make it low friction. And so, if you convince yourself, oh, I need 15 minutes to meditate, you don't. You can use, I have an Apple Watch. They have a breathe app. It's 2 minutes, right? You can find 2 minutes in your day. You spend more of the time than that on Twitter or on Instagram or on TikTok, right? And so find the time to use it. For Roga, even 5 minutes. I think that's the shortest session, right?
And how was the experience for you? Did it help you in any way? What was
Yeah.
your process with the Roga device and the Roga content?
Yeah. It's funny. I think that I went from a skeptic to a convert.
Yeah, because many people hear, brain stimulation and another app out there, and it might be scary, it might be, but how did you went about that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think it's especially scary. Like, we're surrounded by electricity all around us. Our brain is made up of electricity in many ways, right? And so, there's enough science behind it that, it's not going to be dangerous for you. I think that Roga also is proving out more efficacy, and I'm excited for the studies to come from the company on just like how does it affect people, but early signs are good. For me, I was skeptical and I used it and I was like, I do feel better than a normal meditation session. I could tell that it made me feel better. And then with that, it made me crave it more and made me want to come back to using it. And so, I'd recommend people give it a shot, and think about it not only just for the electrostimulation, not only for the content, which I think is great, but think of it as a way to, a way to build a ritual into your day. And as a part of that ritual, you put it on, you put your headset in, you either, use it as a timer, which is sometimes what I do, or you do a guided meditation, or you do a specific class, depending on what you're experiencing. I think it's just an incredibly valuable tool, and all of the different components of it are only getting better, which I'm excited about.
Awesome. And tell me a little bit about, there's now this big move on destigmatizing mental health and putting it into your daily routine and trying to actually take care of yourself. And I see, and there's more and more mental health startups popping up. You're probably part of this ecosystem. So do you see this growing? Do you see there's a shift in mentality, especially throughout the pandemic and what's happening now?
Absolutely, yeah. I think I think the pandemic brought more attention to it, and I think that over even just the last 5-10 years, we've seen it destigmatized to talk about mental health. We're seeing it considered really more deeply as a part of health as a whole, right? So you have health insurers starting to cover it more. You have businesses starting to think about and talk about it more as part of like their employee base. It's really becoming a much more part of healthcare as a whole, right? And I don't think that's a trend that's going to be reversed. I think if anything, it'll be much more a part of it, right? In the same way that physical therapy kind of has, gained in popularity, or exercise as a whole. 100 years ago, people didn't think about going on a jog or lifting weights or something as much as they do now. Now it's something that everyone should be doing and thinking about, and is encouraged because, it's understood that it's a valuable thing to do. And so I think that it'll just become part of the habit for many people. I think that we're going to see it as a part of more schools and, part of, a lot more of education. And so I do think it's, it's something that we're going to see ingrained. And I think there's a lot of companies that are coming up, or, going public, or, really becoming a part of, the world that are super exciting and go towards this idea of controlling the psyche and controlling stress and, working with your mental health. And so I'm excited. I think that there's a lot to come. There's a lot still to be built, right? And there's a lot of technology and things we don't know about the brain. I think it's one of the most fascinating parts about Roga is like, we know it works, but we don't really deeply understand why it works. We don't deeply understand the brain yet, right? Yeah. And so I think that even in terms of just neuroscience research, I think we're going to see a lot more coming out over the next 50 years in our lifetimes about how the brain works and how the brain is connected to, everything else, how stress even works, right? And so it's funny that we're in this day and age where the human body, we don't really deeply understand the mechanisms, right? Like we kind of understand the response of things, okay, you put the stimuli in, this thing happens, but, we don't truly deeply understand where cancer comes from, right? Or where stress comes from, or some of these things. We have some sense of it directionally, but there's so much more that we can do, all the way down from the neuroscience, all the way up through just creating ways to deal with those symptoms.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you've always, every time I've had interactions with you, you're always really calm, very centered, and also very in a very positive mood, even though there might be hectic stuff happening around you. So I wanted to maybe ask you if you have any good advice for people, dealing with a ton of stress and burnout, specifically for startups and founders who like are going up the hill in the battle of getting through success, and then dealing with all the fears, which essentially where most of stress comes from, stress, fears, and trying to control everything. Any words of wisdoms that you can give us out there for people suffering and trying to improve and grow?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much great content out there. One of the things I was thinking about is like breathe, just like people being tied to their breath. There's a book by James Nestor, which is great on the topic. I think that for me, it's really been about creating good habits, basic things that you just do every day that are built into your life, right? And so I have a dog. I love my dog. We go walk every day. It gets me out of the house twice a day at very least. It gets me to walk, which is a great thing to do.
What's his name?
Her name is Harper.
Harper.
And so, yeah. So, Harper, I think getting her during COVID, it's a great way to just force yourself into this habit. The dog has to go out. The dog has to get up at a certain time every day. Right. And so I think that's actually been an interesting hack. It's also, every day I walk with her, I listen to an audiobook. takes me out of my work, takes me out of the things that I'm doing, and helps me really decompress. I think decompression is, one of the big things is that part of I think about of like remote work and what happened in COVID is people are stuck at home. There's no way to decompress, right? And I think that like, stress, I think of it as, something that builds up and then you need to have a release valve. For some people, it's exercise. Some people, it's traveling for a week. For some people, that's Burning Man, which is coming up. And I think a lot of people are looking forward to as a way to let the release
We're
out. And
getting
then
ready for the burn. It's happening after 3 years.
it's
So it's
a lot of
good
people.
way to release all the stress and anxiety that you've been accumulating.
Yeah. And, for my partner, she loves going to Disneyland. So we went to Disneyland recently, and it's the way to just Burning Man's Disneyland for Bay Area hippies, and Disneyland itself is, I think, an escape for a lot of other people. But it's like, find the things that give you joy and take the time to do those. Like, I think for me, in addition to the habits of, walking the dog, it's like trying to just remember and fear setting, I think, is another component of this, right? I'm going to try and find the article. Tim Ferriss wrote one. It's, just a very valuable exercise to do every month. This is pretty much like the blog post. I think he actually did a TED talk on it. And the idea being like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Right? Think through that. How bad would it be? Okay, you lose your job, right?
Or the process of, especially for founders, a lot of them are either have a job and they're doing their startup part-time, or they're thinking about taking the jump and do it full-time. That's a very scary, very stress-inducing thought. And to go about that, this process of, what's the worst that can happen? Like, they'll likely rehire you in the same old job if you quit. And
Yeah, or you get a new job because you've been a founder before, and people like want to trust someone, who's been a founder, and you can be a GM of something, or, people trust that you can run a larger unit with an organization. Like, it's not necessarily a misstep, right? And so, yeah, I think one of my biggest recommendations too is like, control your own psyche. I think that a lot of people, it's up to yourself to think about how you approach a situation. You can think about something as pessimistic, like, oh, I lost my job, this is terrible, I'm gonna be upset, and I hate that company, I hate my boss, blah blah blah. Or you could be like, this is a new opportunity for me. I actually get a fresh start. I'm getting paid for a month because of this layoff, and now I can actually go out and find something new that's more aligned with what I want, in a place that maybe could be more successful, right? And I think that can be exciting too, right? And so a lot of it is the way that you mentally approach stuff in the framing. I think mental framing is a really key component of stress that just doesn't get talked about enough. So, there's so many facets of it, but the basic stuff is like, get outside your house, take time to decompress, right? Take time to see your friends or your family or your loved ones, or, get a dog. I think that like, there's so many things out there that you can do that can really create joy and just get you out of your mental spiral. And seek those things out, and seek habits that are small that can make meaningful change.
right, I totally agree with that, especially. And that's one of the reasons we started Roga in the first place, so that we can help people through those small habits. And it's something that is super simple to use, that can be used easily 10-20 minutes in a day, and it can already change the course of everything you're doing, and really push you in the right direction. We have a lot of programs that are just, let's go on a walk, and then you go with the device and follow the guided instructions, or it's just, let's just sit on this, let's talk about it. Or if you're dealing with something very severe like a panic attack, and then you can always tune in and have a companion there, and trying to build this community, which is, I think, something that you are alluding to, the importance of having this community of people, and to know that you're not alone when you're dealing with this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, being surrounded by people that you connect with, right? Feeling like you're a part of something bigger than yourself oftentimes helps, right? And so for me, feeling like I find meaning in my work, feel like I find meaning in supporting companies like yours who can create a huge impact in the world. And even just, you can find meaning in your everyday. It could just be, you know, smiling at somebody when you're walking past them on the sidewalk, or thanking somebody that you're, you know, getting groceries from. There's tons of even small ways that you can make an impact and just move through the world in a way that's more positive. And so, you know, I try and think about how can I do the right thing in every moment and really be aligned throughout all of it. Like, you know, I am incredibly busy, but I take the time to compost, right? Even tiny scraps of food, because I know that can make a difference in the world. And so, like, you know, there's things like that that, you know, it's almost just like, how do you align your values with your actions and do that in a way that you feel really good?
Awesome. Thank you, Sam, so much for the words and kind words and the wisdom. It's been awesome to have you in the podcast. Wish you all the best, and we'll see you very soon with Dusty Vibes.
Great. Thank you so much, Ami. I appreciate you having me on. You know, I hope everybody out there in the world realizes, you know, it's a weird time, but there's tons of great people. There's tons of great things happening. And, you know, Roga itself, I think, is going to create a big, meaningful impact, and excited to see where you go.
Thank you so much. All right. For everyone out there who's listening to this, make sure to follow us for the podcast. And also, if you're interested in getting a Roga device and getting into the app, you can go to our website, which is rogalife.com, and you'll find a ton more information there. Stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you very much.